Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about Sultana by Ala Huffman. This is Surviving the Civil War, Prison, and the Worst Maritime Disaster in American History. This is set. Well, it's real. Set. It's like, yeah. This disaster happened on April 27th, 1865. My last review took place in 1840-something. I forget now. 1865. A lot happens in 20 years. This is the end of the Civil War. And it's a crazy, crazy story because no one talks about it. A lot of people haven't heard of it. Some people probably have, but a lot of people haven't. And on this channel, since I've been doing this nautical maritime kind of like series, this is the first time we've gotten to a steamboat, a riverboat. And it's a paddle wheel, has side paddle wheels, fairly large. Supposed to carry 376 people tops. In this disaster, it was carrying closer to 2,200. Way overloaded. But what happens? What is this book? Well, as it says, Surviving the Civil War, Prison, and the Worst Maritime Disaster in America. This isn't just the disaster, the maritime disaster, the sinking of the Sultana. This is also about the Civil War and prisoners of war in the Civil War, and then the Sultana, which is like, it's hard to imagine some of the things these people went through because, wow, it's just, let's figure out how am I going to tell you about this? I read the end of this book Ala Huffman talks about how he came to the subject. And he was interested in the Sultana, and the idea was, well, we'll write about what happened in the Sultana. And he decided that he also wanted to follow individuals that had unique stories that were kind of representative of other people's stories. Not only the Sultana explosion and disaster and after, but also where they were before, how they got to that point. And I thought it was a very complete way of doing it, and I really liked it because I wasn't sure how you were going to do. You know, you can kind of, with ships that are out in the ocean, you have all these stories about they're thousands of miles and they're traveling and nobody can see them and they've gone through all this hardship. But this is a riverboat. It's on the Mississippi River, and you can see the shores. I think we get really comfortable with rivers and think like, wow, river, I could just swim to the shore. Well, a lot of people this time couldn't swim. Number one. Number two, it's freezing cold. Well, it's cold. It's cold. In April, you're still getting a lot of the cold water coming down the Mississippi. And three, it's the Mississippi, one of the most unstoppable forces in the world. This is a major, major river in the world, but especially in the United States. It's our major river, the Mississippi. It's also the word you learn how to spell when you're a kid. You think you're really, really cool when you can do MISSISSIPPI. And then for some reason, when I moved to Tennessee, kids would say, crooked letter. I don't know how they do it. But I was like, why are you saying crooked letter? Just call it an S. All right. So Alan follows a few soldiers, maybe 4 or 5 soldiers that mostly are coming from Indiana. They enlist, they go through some training, they go through Nashville, and they are doing different things for the Indiana Volunteers. I forget what their first number was, but eventually they were the 8th Cavalry. Cavalry. Horses. They're working a lot in Alabama, Mississippi, especially Chattanooga, Tennessee, that kind of area. And it's this guy and his buddy and then a few other people. So there's some overlap. And so we get to hear about what they go through and the training and what it's like to be on the road and fighting Johnny Reb and the rebels for the Confederacy. One thing I should say is one of the battles they talked about was the Battle of Nashville. My house was on the path of retreat for, I think, General Hood. and we could find bullets in our backyard from the Civil War. Kind of cool. Should I show you one? No. So we're following these guys around. Eventually, they get injured. A lot of people got injured. This is not a time where you want to get injured because healthcare is not great. You could just as easily die from infection, probably more easily die from infection than in the initial wounds. But our guys see some action. They're getting in right after Chickamauga. I read it. I didn't say it out loud, and now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Chickamauga. So they're getting in after that, and they start to see some action, and they're doing a good job. The Indiana volunteers are doing a good job, and all of our characters at some point are captured, and they go to a prisoner of war camp in Alabama. No, in Georgia. Did I say Alabama originally? Georgia. And there they have to survive, and they are moved around. Now, this is the way he describes prisons. It is horrible, and you can't imagine it. I can't imagine it because of my aphantasia. Check out that video, but you probably can't imagine it either because it's so horrible and disgusting and just what people dealt with. In the South, it was worse than the North, but wasn't that much worse. Out of the 200,000 people that were went into a prison, POW camp, 30,000 in the South died. 30,000 out of 200,000. Not great. And in the North, I think it was like 26,000. So not wonderful. A lot of issues with sanitation, hygiene, crime, murder, just everything that you would not like is happening. There's a lot of really great talk here about different generals and colonels and different actions, and I want to read more about the Civil War. I am currently reading about the Monitor and the Merrimack, which is going to be part of this maritime thing, but I was motivated by reading this to learn more. But reading this makes me want to read more about the Civil War, and I live close to the first Battle of Manassas, Battle of Bull Run, and the second Battle of Manassas. Manassas didn't move. The battle just had different times to take place. So eventually, the war ends, or the war is getting close to ending, and the North and the South decide that they are going to, because they just have too many prisoners, and they eventually the war is going to end, and it's going to be America again, the United States. They're going to have to start bringing these guys home. So they move them to, where was it? Outside of Vicksburg is where our prisoners that we were following went. And then the other ones went to, maybe Georgia, maybe Tennessee, Alabama, Carolina, maybe Carolina, somewhere. Basically, they split the returning POWs. Some went, there were more East Coast, to the East Coast, and then the other ones went outside of Vicksburg. And then the Army was going to arrange for ships to take them up the rivers closer to their homes and get them back home. There's a lot of issues with this process, including some of the key figures were fraudsters, were getting kickbacks in the Army, and were not safe about what they were doing. But one of the ships that came here and wanted to get a contract with the Army to take people back was the Sultana. And the Sultana was supposed to have, I told you, 376 people maximum load, legal load. And they took what was closer to 1,600. And then another train load came and dropped off another 600 folks. So close to 2,200. They get underway. And this ship has had some issues with its boilers. These are steam ships. Steam power is very dangerous. Explosions on these river boats were not uncommon and really led to what is part of the Coast Guard, the Steamboat Inspection Service, because of all the issues they were having. Bad situation, but they overload this ship. There's already people on board when it gets there. Now there are more. and they start to head north, and they're going to Memphis, and then they're going to go on past Memphis up to somewhere north of Memphis. They stop in Memphis. People are allowed off. These are all guys who are emaciated. They're sick. Most of these guys were close to death, and this is their first time out. They've been eating a little bit better in the camp while they were waiting to get out of there, but they're going home. They're so excited. They're not home yet, and they've lived through things that make them think, like, maybe I shouldn't get too excited too quickly. They leave Memphis, heading north more. And then our characters are asleep. And they're on different cots all over the ship because there's just not enough room. And one of the people that were, I say characters, but they're people. They were people that were following. He wakes up and he's disoriented and he can't figure out what's going on. And he looks down, and where he was sitting is a hole. And what he didn't realize is the boilers had exploded. There was no way of cooling the boilers. The setup for the boilers, they could get clogged easily. They could lose a lot of the cooling process, and then they would get overheated and explode because of the mounting pressure. So this happened. Now there's fire, and because there's fire to produce the steam that produces the power for the ship. There's a giant hole. There's fire. Immediately, people are killed just from the explosion. There's body parts all over the place. People don't know what's going on. They were in the middle of their sleep. Now they're like thrown. Pieces of them are hanging off. Broken limbs. Just carnage. Pure carnage. And on top of that, it's cold. And on top of that, a lot of these guys don't know how to swim. There were some women on the boat too, but a lot of them didn't know how to swim. Some of them did. Now, this is not a huge ship. It's not that big. So to have this many people, even if it's a fraction of what was originally on there, jump into the water, they're all fighting for floating debris. They're grabbing each other, pulling each other under. People are drowning or fighting off other people, having to have them drown so they can survive. It's really a survival situation. People have to decide when are you going to jump off? Can I swim? Can I jump on this mule or this dead horse or this door or what? As soon as I get in the water, are 20 people going to try to jump on the thing that's floating, and then I'm either going to drown or I'm going to have to force them off and they may drown. Lots of questions like that. And you just don't know what you're going to do. I know we think we know what we would do, but it's hard to know. And these are guys that have already been through a lot. They've already been through war, a defining moment. They've already been through a POW camp, a defining moment. Now they're on a ship that just blew up, a defining moment. In Memphis, they hear the explosion and they see like a glow from the fire, but they think it must be fires from shore or something like that. Maybe it's a ship, but they don't send anybody. Army boats that are in Memphis aren't sent. There's even a base that doesn't do anything. Eventually, some ships, some other boats figure out that they are there. There's a army boat that pulls up, figures out that they've drowned, or that people are drowning, turns around, goes back to Memphis, tells people, hey, there's a disaster 7 miles up the river, and also we want to get credit, so we get paid for reporting the shipwreck. And then they turn around and they go to help, and more ships come to help, but it's really, there's already people who have died from exposure, drowning, the initial explosion, dying from that. Now the fire is concerned, that's still burning, even though part of the ship is sunk and it's down to the water line. There's still an area where people are on the front of the ship, the bow of the ship, and they're trying to get rescued. They're hoping they're going to get rescued, and the floor is starting to get hot because there's still fire underneath them. And eventually some people get rescued, but a lot of people don't. Now, one of the interesting things was they started rescuing people, and they pulled up next to this base, and they got shot at by the soldiers at the base. And it was a naval officer who was like, what's going on? Are you guys serious? And we were told that we have to shoot at any boats because it might be rebel guerrillas. And our commanding officer told us to do this. And he's like, well, clearly it's not. These people are dying, and they still didn't go help, but they did stop shooting at some point. In the end, between 1,200 and 1,800 people died. And that's worse than the total for the Titanic. I mean, much smaller ship. And you just think like, well, I don't understand how in the middle of a river you could lose that many people. How that many people could drown. And really it's hard to believe. I don't know how to explain it. Besides what the reality was then, how these people were already faring. Now, a lot of these people were already injured in some way. So they may not have been in the best of health. Well, they definitely weren't in the best of health. But a lot of the injuries that were sustained eventually led to people's deaths. People had their burnt throats. They had, issues with broken bones and torn limbs, and a lot of them had PTSD. And we then follow a few of the people that we were following throughout their early parts of their lives back to their homes in Indiana. And a few of them lived to an old age. And that's what the book was about. It was very good. It was very interesting. I was really amazed by some of the talk about the prisons. I wish I would have read more about the Civil War, and I think I will. I do have a Civil War book to read at some point. This was definitely a great look at the greatest maritime disaster in U.S. history, and I think one that is unknown. Why did it not get the credit, or not the credit? Why did it not get the attention it deserved? It was shortly after President Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed. It was shortly after the end of the Civil War. So there were a lot of things happening that got prime billing. They got the big top of the page kind of coverage. And at this point, I think a lot of people just kind of had Civil War fatigue too. It was like, okay, great, yeah. Officers are coming home. Oh, this is horrible. But I was like, yeah, we've heard the war's bad, and things are dangerous out there, and we've heard a lot of bad stories. But really, it should be much more well known in the U.S. So, not the worst maritime disaster in the history of the world, but the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history. Sultana. Thanks for being here today. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.
April 27, 1865. The worst American disaster of the maritime. No one knows the count of lives lost, the soldiers, civilians, and the sisters of charity. $5 a head, Captains Mason and Hatch boarded 6 times the legal load of the Sultana. Leaving Vicksburg, bound for Cairo, Memphis was the tragic last port of call of Sultana.